How do you sing when it feels like God has rejected you? What can you say to God when nothing seems to be going your way? David repeats his complaint from Psalm 60. Have you not rejected us, O God? You do not go out, O God, with our armies. He says that in verse 11 of Psalm 108. And yet, David still has a song to sing. So how does he teach us to sing under pressure? Well, in three main ways. First of all, he helps us to commit ourselves to praise. In the first 4 verses, David confirms his resolve to praise the Lord. His circumstances were far from happy. His foes were strong, as verse 12 says. He knew that the help of man is useless, also verse 12. But his heart was steadfast. He would praise the Lord, verse 1 says. And his imagery is beautiful. I will awake the dawn, verse 2. First light, our first waking breath, is a great time to begin thinking about the Lord, praising the Lord. And David was encouraged by his own praise. He needed deliverance, and he knew that God was glorified in his saving work. So we too should pray for God's help, not only for our own sake, but for the sake of the reputation of God's name, as Psalm 106, verse 8 teaches us to. And then third, David helps us to sing while under pressure in this way by helping us to remember God's promises. David took comfort in God's holy promises concerning the surrounding nations. The tribes of the Israelites, Manasseh he mentions, and Ephraim and Judah, as well as their historical enemies, he names Moab, Edom, and Philistia, they all belong to God. And so David knows he's in God's care because Israel is under God's sovereignty, but so are the foreign nations. The images that he assigns to each of these countries gives David confidence that God will bless his people. Judah is God's scepter, but upon Edom, God casts his shoe, places his foot upon them. Now, we shouldn't misunderstand David's point. God isn't nationalistic. The same God shouts in triumph over Philistia, verse 9, and names Philistia as one of the nations that was born in Zion, Psalm 87, verse 4. Zion, God's glorious city, is much larger than Israel. But God always protects his people from their enemies, whoever those enemies might be. Third, David teaches us to confidently plead for help. The last 2 verses of the psalm are a hopeful request. The godly are never confident in themselves. Prayer is actually an admission of weakness, but it's also an advertisement of God's greatness. Vain, he says in verse 12, is the salvation of man. But in verse 13, with God we shall do valiantly. It is he who will tread down all our foes. And so, friend, until we rise above defeat when we're resurrected in glory, Psalm 108 can help us anticipate the final victory song of the redeemed. Psalm 108, a psalm of David. My heart is steadfast, O God. I will sing and make melody with all my being. Awake, O harp and lyre. I will awake the dawn. I will give thanks to you, O Lord, among the peoples. I will sing praises to you among the nations, for your steadfast love is great above the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches to the clouds. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth, that your beloved ones may be delivered. Give salvation by your right hand and answer me. God has promised in his holiness, with exaltation I will divide up Shechem and portion out the valley of Succoth. Gilead is mine, Manasseh is mine, Ephraim is my helmet, Judah my scepter, Moab is my wash basin. Upon Edom I cast my shoe, over Philistia I shout in triumph. Who will bring me to the fortified city? Who will lead me to Edom? Have you not rejected us, O God? You do not go out, O God, with our armies. O grant us help against the foe, for vain is the salvation of man. With God we shall do valiantly. It is he who will tread down our foes.